Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Tiffany Schultz. I am the marketing manager for undergraduate programs at Forte, and I'd like to thank you all again for coming. This is going to be a great event. We have Haley and Sarah here for NYU, so I'm just going to turn off my screen and you guys take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Nice to be able to connect with all of you. Thanks for being here. Our names are Haley and Sarah, and we're going to be your host of Forte's LinkedIn Live event today. Before we dive into today's topic, which is crushing campus recruiting, Sarah and I will tell you a little bit about ourselves. Great. So again, I'm Haley Garofalo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior assistant director here at the NYU Wasserman Center. I have been at my current center for about 5 years, but I've been working in the education space for just about 10. So a lot of different opportunities to engage in educational spaces, work with students from a variety of different backgrounds. In my current role, I am a career coach, and I also work on our employer engagement team, which is actively working with recruiters, understanding what their needs and wants are so that they can recruit and engage with NYU students, as well as working with a variety of students and helping different people from different backgrounds learn their job search tips and tricks. So I will pass it over to Sarah.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Rosenthal. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Experiential Learning Programs, also at the NYU Wasserman Center. I've been at NYU for almost 9 years now, but also in education for a long time. But one of the things that I'm most excited about talking about today stems from the fact that my very first job after college, I actually got through a networking connection. So this is something I've always been really excited to talk to people about. And in my role at Wasserman, I am also a career coach, and I work on a number of different programs that support students pursuing things like internships, projects, and other things that allow them to get some really great experience that you will hopefully then go and share with recruiters and other networking connections. So let's now dive into discussing into the topic of how to crush campus recruiting. So when it comes to interacting with recruiters, they really are involved in the process from start to finish. They will be helping to advertise positions at their company. They'll be part of the reviewing resumes and interview process. They'll even be having conversations with their hiring managers to make sure that really they know what the position is, they know what they're looking for to make sure that they get the best fit. So they're a little bit like brand ambassadors for their company. And that's why they're the ones going to these career fairs, to these recruiting events. They know the company, they know the culture there, they know what the priorities are for the hiring manager. And so that means that when you're talking to a recruiter, whether it's at a career fair or a recruiting event or any other setting, there's 3 sort of steps that you're going to want to take in order to really make the most of this connection opportunity. So the first is to do your research. The second is to make sure that you're asking really, really good questions. And the last is to make sure that you're following up. So I'll kick it to Haley to talk first about how to connect with recruiters through research.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, it's really important to go into these different recruiting opportunities, whether it is attending an in-person or virtual career fair, info session, coffee chat, any of the ways in which you might be working with different recruiters or people at organizations that you're interested in working at. So doing your research ahead of time, getting to know the company's mission and values. What do they stand for? What are they all about? By looking at their websites or potentially even talking to some people who might work for them. It's helpful to make a cheat sheet to kind of keep track of all the different companies that you're interested in working for, as well as edit your resume or application materials to fit the types of roles that you're applying for. You really want to showcase that you have the transferable skills and different types of experiences that those particular recruiters are seeking based on their job description. So as much as you can kind of prepare that in advance, get as much information through the job description or the websites as you can to understand what the recruiter wants, the more obvious it will be to them that you have what they're looking for as you are submitting your applications. Another component of doing your research is practicing your pitch, which we'll talk about in a second, just learning how to put yourself forward, how you want to show up to these recruiters and be able to speak about your experiences in a way that's related and relevant to them. And then the last component that we have on here is learning the dress code. So dress codes can vary based on numerous factors, including industry, culture, your role within an organization, what will be required of you. Some dress codes allow for more room for interpretation than others. Business formal versus business professional. As you can see on our slide here, there's a couple of different suggestions for what those dress codes typically include. However, we do want to acknowledge that a lot of these dress codes are based in these white-centric different ideas of professionalism. And it is really important to go through this job search process and decide how you want to show up through a DEI lens and whatever is most authentic to you, recognizing that, you know, BIPOC and other marginalized identities are often negatively affected by dress codes when they are rooted in this kind of Western white-centric culture. So we just want to ensure that everyone is showing up in their most authentic way possible. And then when it comes to pitching yourself, you really want to think about, in a really short, clear, and concise way, how you want to show up to these recruiters. So usually it's about 30 to 60 seconds for your pitch. And it includes these main points of who are you, what do you do, what do you want, and what's next. So you really want to be comprehensive, but again, you want to customize it to the person that you're talking to. If you're looking for a data science role, but you're talking about your experience in, I don't know, education, they may not be understanding what you're really looking for or how you're going to be interested in the roles that they're hiring for. So as much as possible, you want to kind of cater it. So using myself as an example, I studied human development in undergrad, and I had interest in working in education and for education nonprofits. So I would have used something like, hi, my name is Haley. I'm a senior studying at Binghamton University, which is where I went to undergrad. I'm going to graduate, you know, this May, and I'm currently working in an internship at an education nonprofit where I'm learning about aspects of HR or different components that are it's allowing me to understand education and how to ensure that people have good experiences at work. And so I'm really interested in this upcoming role because it relates to my experience with employee experience and within the education space. Obviously, I'm just, you know, kind of using some examples. I can pull out a project or something along those lines of like something I've worked on that might be interesting to them. And then coming with a specific question at the end. Can you tell me more about what it's like working at your company, or what's your lens into approaching this specific part of the industry, or whatever the case might be. And I think that's going to be showcasing that you're not only telling them about yourself, but you're able to ask them the questions that are really important to you as well. Okay.
So, building off of what Haley was just saying, there's the next step to developing that relationship, having that good interaction with a recruiter, and it's about asking good questions. So, what is that question you ask at the end? There's a few do's and don'ts that I'm just going to go through really quickly. The first is making sure that before, you know, in that research stage, you're learning about you know, the company culture, the career paths or industry trends that are there, and then using the questions that you ask to further that knowledge, rather than, you know, asking them things that you might be able to find on their website or by researching on Glassdoor. The other thing you want to do is make sure that you're making adjustments depending on like what kind of setting you're in. So, you know, you might have the opportunity to talk with a recruiter one-on-one, especially if they like come to a student club for an event, or maybe at a recruiting session, you get that one-on-one time. But there might also be group opportunities to engage at something like a career fair where maybe there's a lot of people waiting to talk to that one employer, and they might say like, okay, you five, like come and talk to me. So making sure that you have a list of questions that you want to ask, but you also prioritize like what is the one or two, questions that I need to ask every single recruiter, every single employer, so that you get all the information that you need. And especially if it's in a group setting where you might only get to ask one or two questions, you know what your priorities are from the start. Some of these kind of like don'ts, or just things to look out for, is to make sure that you're not appearing uninformed about the organization. You don't want to walk up to them and just be like, so what are you guys about? Right? Making sure that you've taken the time to figure out which companies you're going to, reading about their organizations. If you're in a group setting, trying not to dominate the conversation, but this also goes for any kind of conversation. You want to be the one asking the questions, but that means that you also are the one doing most of the listening. So less talking, and making sure that you're asking those questions to gain more information from the person you're talking to. The last, which is again not necessarily like a clear don't, but when it comes to asking questions about salary or benefits, you generally want to save those for another time. If it's in the context of, a recruiting event or a career fair. If you have questions about visa sponsorship, that is certainly something that you can, work into the conversation. I just wouldn't recommend like leading with that, or, making it the very first question or the only thing that you talk about, because there are so many things that you can learn from the conversation beyond just whether they'll sponsor you as a student. So the next slide is going to show you like a list of some different questions that we might recommend. This is not an exhaustive list. We definitely make sure that you're taking the time again to research, to ask specific questions where possible, and really thinking about what is it that you want to know, so that you can ultimately tailor these kinds of questions to the person that you're asking them. When it comes to these questions, we also need to make, some adjustments depending on whether you're in person or it's a virtual setting. So when it comes to being in person, eye contact, a firm handshake, and smiling is really going to allow whoever's talking to you to get a sense of how you're engaging with them, how you're showing up, as a professional. I want to also acknowledge, to what Haley was talking about, that these are somewhat, Western, and white-centered ways of what professionalism looks like. And so if this is something that is uncomfortable for cultural reasons or for like neurodiverse reasons, it's certainly something we encourage you to think about, reflect on, make sure that you are practicing and that you can go into it feeling a little bit more comfortable, or that you're researching companies where maybe the expectations are a little bit different. When it comes to a virtual setting, make sure that you test your technology up front. And whenever possible, you want to try to find a pretty quiet, distraction-free space. It can be really loud if you go to like a coffee shop, or even the library sometimes can be a louder space. So whenever possible, try to go somewhere that's going to be quiet, where you can really hear, and have that actual, engaging conversation. And lastly, business is higher, but obviously if it's virtual, from the waist up is really all you have to worry about.
Great. So the last component of this, as Sarah mentioned earlier, is following up. So now that you've gone to the career fair, you've gone to the info session or whatever, and you've met the recruiters, being sure to follow up with them so you can continue that connection is usually very helpful. So if you're in person, you can ask for a business card. If you're remote, you can ask via Zoom chat, or often they share their contact information. And you can use that to send a thank you or a follow-up message within the next couple of days after the event, so that you can, remind them that you attended and ensure that that connection continues. So as much as you can sort of shape that message to relate to the event or what you learned from it, the better. So specific examples around, it was great learning about X detail, or I believe this part of my experience would make me a great fit for this company. It really shows that you went above and beyond to pay attention to what they were talking about when you met them, and that you're now relating why that is relevant to you or why you think you would fit well into something that they shared. So you don't have to go write, tons of pages, even email, super long, probably won't work in your favor. So you do want to be short, clear, and concise, and be sure to focus on the information that you think is most relevant to the employer and going to get you to stand out. Recruiters do appreciate this type of outreach, especially if you're approaching it from this opportunity of like, I just want to learn more. I'm really interested. So feel free to take a screenshot of this slide. We'll also be recording this so you can take a screenshot later to have some follow-up email templates. But with that, we're going to talk about the power of networks next. So take it away, Sarah.
So, like I said, I actually got my first job out of college through someone that I knew. And you can see here, this number sort of comes from a few different reports that have gone out. And it's that 65 to 85% of all positions are filled through networking. It's certainly, a pretty large range, but really the main takeaway we want from this is that, networking really can be such a great way to learn more about positions. The interaction you have with a recruiter is just the start of that, and continuing the conversation with those people, developing them as part of your network, and also reaching out to people maybe who are not what you're, interacting with at a career fair, but are still people who can give you insight into the companies or the types of positions that you're interested in. So ultimately, things that happen when people use their network for the job search is that they'll find positions 1 to 3 months faster. They'll receive higher wages and higher position jobs. And there's increased retention because they go into it a little bit more knowing what to expect because they've had a conversation with people at that company already or in that position. They know what to expect. They know what kinds of opportunities for growth that are available at that company. So it leads to people being more likely to stay in that job. When it comes to how or where to network, we get this question a lot. So, I would recommend you all take some time, look through this list and think about who are the people that, I can actually interact with, maybe from this list on the left. But the list on the right is also a really great place to look to when it's time for you to think about where else can I, develop my network. I want to sort of shout out the LinkedIn alumni tools that are on LinkedIn, where you can actually search for your university and then check out alumni and filter by things like the company that they work for, the type of position they have, what their major was, what skills they use, and where they're located. So it's a really great way for you to potentially find people who are doing the types of things you're interested in or doing it in the places that you're interested in being so that you can really get to know more about that.
Great. So to Sarah's point, LinkedIn is a really useful tool, and the strategy of reaching out to people on LinkedIn has become very effective and popular more recently. So according to this LinkedIn study, 35% of LinkedIn messages did lead to a new opportunity, which is great. So I think it's really important to think about how we're reaching out to people, what will be most effective use of our time, and that often comes with how to present the ask. So when reaching out to different alumni, recruiters, people you may know through different networks, whoever it might be on LinkedIn, you really want to use these 4 different strategies of being curious, specific, patient, and genuine with your outreach and your approach. It's really important to customize this message to the person that you're reaching out to. It's super obvious when someone sends the same exact message to 50 different people, just hoping to get a response. But if you're really able to take a look at their profile, learn about what's interesting to you about them or their experience, and then in your outreach message, customize it or curate it to asking them a specific question about one of their roles or experiences, asking for advice or support, and being specific about what that ask is. So As you can see in this example here, it states the interest, it states what they're interested in learning more about, and then it gives a specific ask of, are you available to chat for 30 minutes in the next 2 weeks? So it's really clear, it's really concise, and it gives the person on the receiving end a really great way to answer in a direct way that's going to be most helpful to you. So definitely think that this is a good approach.
So once you've sent that incredibly well-worded message on LinkedIn, what you're asking for, that 30-minute conversation, is something called an informational interview. We've listed out some questions here that you could, consider. I'm not going to read them because that would be really boring, but what we would recommend is, thinking about what are the questions that you have about the field, about the company, about getting started, about, breaking into an industry for the first time, or making a switch. Maybe you've been, pursuing one thing and then you decide that you want to do something else. How do you learn from somebody else's lived experience and ask them questions that will give you answers to those questions that you have? I want to call attention to the last question on the bottom right, which is at the very end of your conversation, asking that person, are there other people that would be helpful for me to speak with? This is the very essence of networking and really developing relationships with people, and then using their network in the most positive way possible to then learn from more people that they may know. So big picture, the way we want you to think about networking is that networking is just connecting with your future boss or future colleague. So now that we've talked a little bit about how to develop these relationships, we want to open it up to questions.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. That was a great presentation. It looks like we don't have any right now. If you do have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat and I can ask Haley and Sarah, but we do have one question. So going back to what you were saying at the beginning, what is the immediate next step to take after attending a career fair?
So I can take this one. It depends, of course, if it's virtual or in person, kind of what that looks like. But usually you get some sort of contact information from attending a career fair. So my immediate next step would be within 24 to 48 hours after the fair, sending some sort of email follow-up message, as I was talking about earlier. That allows you to reflect on what you learned from your interaction or conversation with them at the career fair. So as much as you can, after the fair, write down some notes of oh, this, recruiter shared X, X, and X with me. I want to remember this so I can use it in my follow-up and say, hey, thank you so much for telling me about these different things. I would love to learn more, and ask some sort of question of what you're most interested in the next thing, of do you have any tips for a next step for me, or what do you recommend as I'm submitting my application, or whatever it is, and how you want to continue that relationship to have it expand. I don't know if you have anything to add, Sarah.
No, that's great advice. I don't know, I don't know if business cards are still a thing, but I used to take a business card and then just flip it over and write on the back, what is it that I talked to this person about, just to keep it all, in one place. But I think also making sure that you're keeping track of the different employers, because for one employer, it might be that you just attending, now you're on some kind of listserv. Maybe if you, had a position that you were applying for, there's a different next step for, that employer. So I think keeping track of what the next steps are, depending on how the conversation went, and making sure that, in any kind of follow-up message that you're sending, you're not sort of saying the same thing that, you were talking about at the fair, and thinking about, are there ways to be more specific, like asking, is there a way for you to connect with the hiring manager or somebody who's on the team? Remember, you now have this, in at the company, something that a lot of people don't. So, the recruiter might get messages from other people saying hey, I want to learn more about this position. So you don't want to ask the same question because you already talked to them, right? You already have this in. So is there a way for you to now say, now that I've talked to you about the company, about the positions that are open, I wanted to say that like I'm really interested in this position. Is there anybody on the team or somebody, the hiring manager that I could have another conversation with and really connect with them? That's a way to sort of, I don't say like, jump further along in the process, but it really shows that interest and that engagement and allows you to leverage the conversation that you had in a way that's different from, somebody who's just cold emailing, that recruiter saying like, hey, what are you all about?
Awesome. Great. We did get a question, another one. Is there a correct way to ask for another point of contact as an informational interview concludes?
Sarah, I feel like you started with that just now.
I mean, I think that, just asking point blank, like, hey, is there anyone else that you can think of? I would also say it depends on how the conversation's going. If you're talking to them a lot about the day-to-day work that they're doing, and you have some other questions that maybe you didn't get to in that 30-minute conversation, saying like, I'm also really interested in learning about getting started in this, organization. I'd love to talk to you about that. But I was also wondering, if there's anybody else in the company that you can think of, or anyone else in your network at a different organization who might be able to share like that experience, right? So really thinking about what else do I have questions about? That's kind of why there isn't like a script for these kinds of conversations, because it really depends on you, the person who's asking, like, what do you want to get out of this conversation? So I think making sure that you have those answers for yourself of like, what do I want to learn from this? Who do I want to talk to? How can I sort of see this relationship continuing? Because networking, informational interviews, I think all of these terms are tossed around a lot. And ultimately, a lot of people will have one-off conversations with people, but it really takes, a little bit more to develop a real relationship with somebody. And so knowing that these one-off like informational interviews are going to happen, but who are the people that you can really see developing that relationship with professionally, and thinking about, okay, what does that person look like? What are they sharing with me about their experience, so that I'm I have a relationship. I keep using the word relationship, and that
Mhm.
goes two ways, right? It's not just like, hey, you tell me about your job and that's it. That's the end of the conversation. You have a lot to offer as well. You have a new perspective that, this person doesn't have. And so thinking also like, what do I have to offer this conversation? Because that's going to be the strongest relationships, is where it goes both ways.
Awesome, great response. We do have one more question, and this is for me actually. Will this presentation be available after the event? Yes, you can see this recording on YouTube at Forte Foundation. So please feel free to visit us on YouTube. We also had another question if your slide will be available, your slide deck.
We can, if that's
Okay.
an option. Yeah.
Great. We will see if we can add that as a PDF on the YouTube channel. So there is a quick link.
Great.
If there are no other questions, though, I will let you guys finish it off.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And thanks everyone for being part of Forte's LinkedIn Live event today. Feel free to connect with Sarah or I via LinkedIn, give us any feedback you might have, and stay tuned for Forte opportunities designed to give you a competitive edge.